In this video, I want to break down 5 steps that will help you overcome intrusive thoughts quickly and easily. But before we dive in, if you haven't seen me or my channel before, my name's Ed Barton. I'm a professional anxiety coach. I'm also a former Buddhist monk who trained in a monastery in Japan for 3.5 years. And I use my decades of personal experience in overcoming anxiety and my time as a Buddhist monk in working with the mind to help others overcome their anxiety. So in order to help you overcome your intrusive thoughts, I'd like to first tell you a story about my time training in the monastery in Japan. Now, as a Zen monk, your prime objective is to not think, because when you think, you're taken away from the present moment, and all your teacher wants you to do when you're in the monastery is to live purely in the present moment, to let go of the past, let go of the future, and be completely absorbed in the present. In order to do this, my teacher, who was a terrifying mix of Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid and Yoda from Star Wars, would scream at us in our sanzens, which are our one-to-one interviews with him that we would have every day. And he would roar things like, "No thinking, no idea," and shout these kind of things at us every day, trying to tell us to stop thinking. And he could tell from your responses in the interview how deep and clean your meditation was and how much you'd been thinking. And if he could tell you'd been thinking a lot, he would say things like, "Noisy, dirty mind." At first it was fine. I really used his advice and I cut away my thoughts. I realized that the past was just a figment of my imagination, that the future was also a dream that I was conjuring up, and I started to get a much clearer picture of what was going on right in front of me. And I thought this was great. It went really well for 6 months. And then after 6 months, the wheels started to come off. All of this pressure on me to not think, and me telling myself to constantly, no thinking, no idea, don't think, only live in the present, don't think, don't think. This caused a huge internal explosion, and my mind just started to go absolutely wild, and it started to create a very loud, constant commentary on everything that was going on. It was like, "Oh look, there's a man over there, it's raining, he's got an umbrella, the umbrella's blue. I can hear a bird up in the tree. Is it a blackbird? Is it a thrush? Is it a starling?" And my mind was just rabbiting away, commenting on everything that I saw and experienced. And of course, my teacher picked up on this in the Sanzen, in the interview, and he was yelling at me, telling me to stop all this noise in my head, to stop thinking. That only made it worse. So I had these loud, constant racing thoughts, just commenting on everything. And I honestly thought I was going to go crazy. I'm happy to say I didn't go crazy. This explosion reached a peak, and then I just gave up and just let everything go, and then it subsided, and I never had an explosion of intrusive thoughts of that kind again. So the first point I want to make about intrusive thoughts, which comes out of that story, is do not try to repress your thinking. The more you try to repress any thoughts or repress your mind or force your mind in any way, it will rebel. What you learn through doing lots of meditation and getting to know the mind is that the mind is like an unruly, rebellious little toddler. And the more you try to tell it to do something, the more it's not going to want to. If you get into bed at 9 o'clock and say, "Right, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep," you can pretty much guarantee your mind is not going to cooperate. It's going to start conjuring up all kinds of plans and give you plenty of things to think about, which are going to stop you going to sleep. Some meditation teachers in Thailand use the metaphor of an angry water buffalo for this kind of mind. If you hold on to the rope when an angry water buffalo is stampeding all around the rice paddy, it's going to drag you all over the place. The way to deal with an angry water buffalo is to just let go of the rope. So if you're having a lot of intrusive thoughts, do not hold on to the rope. Do not get involved with them. You just let go, because that is how the thoughts naturally subside by themselves. Working with the mind is not like working with other things. It's often very counterintuitive. For example, if you want to go to sleep, the best way to fall asleep is often to not put any focus on sleep. It's to put focus on your breathing or to something else. And so it is with the mind generally. You often have to work with it in a kind of oblique way. You cannot directly tell it what to do, because it will usually fight against you. Another analogy which is useful for understanding the mind is the Mexican finger trap. And I'm not sure if you've seen these in joke shops when you're a kid, but you would put your finger inside. It's a kind of woven device. And if you try and pull your finger, it actually traps the finger tighter. And it's just like that with working with intrusive thoughts. If you try to pull against them, defend against them, deal with them, reason with them, repress them, it only makes the situation worse. It only grabs you tighter. So the way to get out of the Mexican finger trap is to just relax completely, and then it opens. The second thing to know about intrusive thoughts is that they can often be thought of as a form of self-sabotage or mental self-harm. This is very much what I experienced in my own life, and I found that as I learned to know my mind better, know myself better, appreciate myself more and love myself more, my intrusive thoughts naturally subsided. I found they really had room to flourish and grow in a space where I was very negative about myself, I was very punishing on myself, and these unwanted critical voices would come up, nasty thoughts, repetitive loops of catastrophizing, what if scenarios, worrying myself unnecessarily, wondering if I was going to go crazy, thinking if I'm becoming schizophrenic. But these started to disappear the more that I loved myself. So intrusive thoughts can be thought of in terms of a form of self-sabotage, and also as a form of mental self-harming. So the way to reduce them in this instance is to get to know yourself better, get to know your mind better, and to love yourself more. And they will naturally subside as your self-esteem increases. Another very important point to understand when you're dealing with intrusive thoughts is to think of intrusive thoughts and anxiety itself in terms of energy. And in Japan, when I was training as a Zen monk, there is a big emphasis on energy and energy medicine. This is linked to the Chinese roots of Zen and Qigong practices and Kung Fu. You can think of anxiety and thoughts and intrusive thoughts as being a kind of energy which is often trapped up in the head. The energy is not allowed to flow freely and smoothly throughout the body. And this is really exacerbated in our modern society when we're using our eyes and our ears. We're often talking to communicate in our jobs and leaving voice messages on messaging apps and so on. A lot of the activity in our daily life goes on around our five senses. There's not so much emphasis on the body as there would have been in previous generations. So by doing practices like Qigong and this simple exercise where you move your hands upwards on the inhale and downwards on the exhale, you can start to allow energy to move more freely through the body, and you can start to use your imagination to focus and imagine energy currents flowing down from your head, down through your body, down to your feet. And as you breathe, you can imagine the breath moving down and down the body, down the legs, into the feet. You can also do standing practices, grounding practices, all of these somatic practices which put the mind back into the body more and take it out of the head. And also, if you're consuming a lot of crisis news, watching and listening to a lot of political podcasts, this kind of content, this is very anxiety producing. There's so much talk around gender divide, hate crimes, the threat of World War III, racial divide, the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine. All of this can cause a lot of agitation and keep our energy locked up in the head, which can also lead to intrusive thoughts. So I really recommend finding some practices where you use your body, whether this is yoga, tai chi, standing practices, grounding practices, but to help the energy flow through the body and get out of the head. The fourth point to bear in mind when overcoming intrusive thoughts is to not take your mind seriously. If you think of when you dream, your mind is capable of conjuring up all kinds of incredible, fantastic, surreal, amazing scenarios. That's what the mind does. It can extrude all kinds of bizarre and fantastic thoughts and images. So when you get intrusive thoughts, whether it's what if thoughts, whether it's ideas about am I going crazy, catastrophizing about the future, whatever it might be, these are just extrusions of the mind. They're not to be taken seriously. And one of the biggest problems that I see with sufferers is that they think everything that they think is real or important. But this is really not the case. The mind is capable of conjuring up all kinds of bizarre nonsense, as I said, and you only need to look back at your last colorful dream that you can remember to see just how bizarre the mind can be. But the problem really comes when we start to take our mind and our thoughts seriously. It should be taken with a big pinch of salt, and as I said, be treated as a very mischievous little toddler a lot of the time. The fifth way to overcome intrusive thoughts is to meditate. And I know you might have heard this advice before in relation to a lot of things related to mental health and anxiety, but I don't even mean here necessarily a structured formal meditation practice where you focus on the breath or count the breath. Even just setting time aside each day to just sit down quietly in a room, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and just let thoughts come up and let them go is very, very useful. because if you don't ever spend time to let thoughts from your subconscious come up and just play out in front of you, they're going to come up at nighttime, or they're going to come up in the form of intrusive thoughts, and you're going to take them seriously and think they're very worthwhile and worth pursuing. If we just sit each day and allow this energy of the subconscious to come up and throw these thoughts up, all kinds of things can play out on the cinema screen of our mind. They might be childhood recollections, memories, all kinds of things, benign, traumatic. They can be anything. You might get intrusive thoughts, but there is a habit of the mind to throw out a lot of thoughts. And if we give it some space each day just to burn out some of that energy, it's a bit like, as I say, having this mischievous toddler of the mind, and we just give it 20 minutes to just run like crazy around the playpen. We don't touch it, we don't try and control it, we just let it burn out some of this energy. Because as I say, if we don't do this, then the mind can throw out a lot of intrusive thoughts. So it's really just a chance to let the mind let off some steam, because there is an energy to the mind, there is an energy to thoughts. And as I say, if we're up in our heads all day, that can get very trapped up here. If our nervous system is very activated with our anxiety, it causes a lot of racing thoughts. So just having a chance to sit, it also brings the energy down lower into the body, and it gives the mind a chance to just let off this steam and just throw as much crap out as it wants to. And you just don't get involved, you don't have to do anything with it. You just let stuff come up and don't attach to it, hold on to it, or get involved with it. So those are 5 ways which I've used myself personally. I've used them with clients. They help you overcome intrusive thoughts quickly and easily. If you need more help in overcoming intrusive thoughts or other issues related to anxiety, check out the other videos here and here.